Hello everyone, here for the second Croydon Constitutionalists Pubcast, live, he says, from the Skylark Pub in South Croydon. I'm here with my fellow Croydon Constitutionalist, Dan Heaton. Dan, how are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you very much, Mike. This evening we are drinking Redemption Pale Ale, which is in stark contrast to something that we were drinking just a few weeks ago when we were in Berlin.
As Dan said, early September we took a trip to Berlin, and being good Europeans, as you know us to be, and a weekend in an interesting city, something pretty new city might come as a surprise, and anyone that knows their German history will know that Germany's not been around that long, and it was interesting to see somewhere that's changed so much in its short time. Dan, do you want to give us a few initial impressions of the city and the people?
Yeah, so it was a bit peculiar. So when we got into the city centre from the airport, having decided that we're going to have a weekend of drinking and culture, as it were, we ended up in the east side of the city. And as of course you know, the city was divided by the Berlin Wall. And it was interesting because it looked like quite old, or it seemed quite old in the part that we were. But that was in the as I say, the east side. And we wandered along and saw the Brandenburg Gate and such things. And there was a real stark contrast between the east, what would turned out to be the east side, and what was the west side. Because the west side was quite clearly far more developed, far more built up, even to this day. But what we didn't realise as we started off on our journey around Berlin, and that we discovered the following day when we went on a guided tour by the original Berlin Tours, I believe, the original Berlin walking tours. I can highly recommend that tour, by the way.
Can't recommend them enough. Fantastic tour.
Our guide called Darren, who was an Irish chap who was doing a PhD at Cambridge, I believe, and he's spending a lot of time in Germany because he's doing a PhD in German history. Absolutely brilliant. Only £12.50. You can find him on TripAdvisor. As Mike says, cannot say enough about that. Was that the east side? Yes, some of it's old because it never got rebuilt after the war. But some of the stuff which is there, which looks really old, actually isn't that old.
So my enduring memory there's a Gothic cathedral in Berlin that if you looked at it, you're talking 15th, maybe 16th, at a push 17th century. It's newer than my house. Now, of course, I don't expect any of you to know how old my house is, but it's kind of late 1800s, early 1900s. It's an old house. It's not that old. It's older than the main Gothic cathedral in Berlin, which it just seems preposterous as we looked at it. And of course, that's the nature of Berlin and the nature of the formation of Germany being something that only happened late in the 19th century, that it spun out and developed its own history.
It did indeed, and that cathedral that Mike references, today it is still being rebuilt after it was damaged during the Second World War, because it ended up in the eastern part of the city. There was no money in East Germany, as it were, to actually rebuild it. So there's work going on as we speak to actually renovate it, to get it back to what it was. But as Mike says, it's not going back to its 15th century glory. It's going back to its, early 20th century glory, in fact, is when it was actually completed. And that in itself, it's about architecture there, but actually it was a good example of the way that Germany developed in the late 19th century and early 20th century. As our tour guide Darren referenced, is that Prussia, which is that part of Germany which Berlin is in, took over most of Germany, tried to basically take over Austria as the main power in Central Europe, and as the bigger power in continental Europe from France. And of course we know where all that led. But it was fascinating to go around the different parts of Berlin on this guided tour. It took about 4 hours, but we had a little break at one point. Mike, what was your favourite part of that guided tour that we took?
I think perhaps one of the most interesting things was and I wouldn't call it a favourite park because it's a wrong terminology, but was Hitler's bunker. It's a car park, and there was a bit of a discussion, and this was one of the great things of the tour, was a discussion of what should be there and what shouldn't be there. And I certainly feel that a memorial to that seems wrong, although because people know where the bunker was, people do treat it as a memorial. It was just a strange reminder that life goes on, really. Perhaps a kind of a broader topic, or a much broader topic than this podcast, but Pubcast. But life goes on, and people live there. There's a car park for them, and that memory is washed away. One of the strangest things, of course, we went to was the Holocaust Memorial, and it's worth experiencing. It's eerie, and maybe that's what it should be. It's not clear to me why or what it is, Dan. I don't know. What were your thoughts on that?
It completely bamboozled me. All I can say is anyone listening to this podcast should go online and look at the pictures of it and see if they can understand. And indeed, please do go and visit Berlin and see what you think of it for yourself, because it wasn't. It's not a statue as such. It's a piece of. It's almost a huge installation, I think, is the artistic term for it. But yeah, and it was. I think one of the other places that we went to, which was I suppose just about in the western side, was Checkpoint Charlie. Which was distinctly different from the stuff in the eastern part, because it was very, very westernised, very souvenir shops and what have you. Get your photo took with a pretend soldier and this sort of thing. I don't know what you thought about that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, look, Checkpoint Charlie is such an incredibly memorable thing. It's just down. There's a lot of Berlin Wall memorabilia around there. It reminds me of my youth, because of course, not that I was there, but as someone that grew up in the 80s, the Cold War was a real facet of life, and it really sort of, to see it in reality was quite interesting, inspiring, whatever the right words are. Of course, one of the things that Checkpoint Charlie struck me as and meant happened was one of my impressions of the city generally. It's a city divided still. Although the Berlin Wall has gone, stuff stops in the middle. It's not like London, it's not like Paris, New York, LA, Washington, cities I can think I've been to that have major through roads through them, and maybe they've pedestrianised some bits, but really are major traffic hubs. Berlin is east and west separate, and that was a really weird thing to see, because of course the road systems were redeveloped after the war. The city was basically destroyed during the war, and that's still true today, that there's a kind of a separation in the middle. Now, that's quite pleasant in the sense that it's an open space to walk around, but it lacks a buzz and a hub that I felt almost anywhere else I've ever been. I don't know, Dan, how did you feel? What was your sense of the place?
My sense of the place was, it was a place that was trying to come to terms with itself, even now, what are we, 28 years after reunification, something like that. You had a very commercialised western part and a sort of almost oldie worldy eastern part that was still trying to be rebuilt, even today, some of it. But also, what I also took from it was almost a going out of its way to be politically correct. It was most peculiar. It was, I'm not saying it was massively left wing or anything like that, but it was just like, anything goes. It's all cool, what have you, which is all well and good. But one thing I did see was right near the Brandenburg Gate. So that big symbol of the divided Germany and the divided Berlin. The European Union has put in place a sort of museum, a exhibition centre. Come and learn about the European Union. Now, who's paying for that? And why is it in that location? it's a prime location for anything in a major city, and the European Union has took it up to preach its gospel of whatever it wants to teach, but it's not free market economics. It's not a business that's set up there. They're basically propagandising the place for their own purposes, and of course, and to be fair, maybe that's what they're thinking because of where they've located it, because it's a divided continent and what have you. But you would imagine in a free market economy that would be costing a lot of money. Suffice to say, we didn't bother going inside, but from the outside, it was quite clear that's what they were doing.
I think Dan really hit up on it there, in my view as well, which was that sense of a lack of belief in itself that I felt in other capitals was definitely clear in Berlin. It just felt a bit uncentered, and that was a strange feeling for a place that it didn't feel like a mega city, a city that was happening that I felt in other places. Even Paris isn't necessarily a mega city, but it's got an art, it's got a culture, and that was all lacking from Berlin, and maybe that's just a facet of its history. But really interesting, well worth seeing, and if you ever get the chance, get out there and experience that culture, and absolutely about being European, just not necessarily being in the European Union. So I think we'll leave it there. Dan, thanks. Let's enjoy our shot at redemption.
We will.
And goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.